Hello everyone, welcome to Thursday's lesson. Well done for your hard work in the independent tasks on Tuesday and Wednesday. The two tables that you produced in those lessons are going to form excellent revision resources when we come to look at The Tempest at the end of the year in preparation for your assessments. Today we are doing a very challenging but also very exciting lesson, and I know you're going to do great and you're going to really enjoy it. Before we get into it, make sure you're writing down the title, date and LO. The title is pronounced criticality. Pause the video and return when you've got those three things written down, please. Okay, now you can complete the do now. It's very important that you're answering the questions in full sentences, which means you use the question as part of your answer to make sure that it makes sense. So, for example, question number 1. What did Queen Elizabeth think of exploration? If you write your answer in your exercise books as good, you haven't got the question. When you look back at this answer, you're going to think, what's good? Why have I written that down? So you need to make sure that you're writing in full sentences so that your do now forms a really good revision resource. Pause the video and come back when you've answered these 5 questions in full sentences, please. Okay, if you're back, you're ready to make some purple pen corrections. It's very important that you're correcting the answers if you got it wrong. Just like making sure that your answers are in full sentences, it is equally as important to make sure that you've got the purple pen corrections down if you need them. So, Queen Elizabeth thought exploration was good as it made her more powerful. As you can see, it's a full sentence. Got the answer, but it makes sense. The water and sea represent chaos in The Tempest. Magic is a symbol of Prospero's power. Prospero's magic is often confused with God or nature. Gonzalo is calm and collected during The Tempest. Pause the video and make any corrections that you need to before returning. Okay, so today we are looking at a critical article, and it's called A Post-Colonial Reading of The Tempest. We're going to read an article that's going to help us understand what did the critics think about The Tempest after colonisation. So, a critical article is a document that somebody writes, a critic, after a text, inspired by a text. And they criticise and analyse and evaluate the text. Critical articles are very interesting because it allows us to think about texts in different ways. The article we're reading today is talking about critics of The Tempest post-colonialism. So after colonisation, what did the critics think about The Tempest? So we're going to read the article together. It's incredibly important that you follow along because some of the language and some of the ideas in this article are challenging, and I'm going to need to explain them to you. If you just skip through and read these on your own, your understanding is not going to be as strong. So, critics frequently read The Tempest as a story about artistic creation. Prospero has been defined as a playwright, just like Shakespeare, shaping the main action in the play through his magic. A playwright is simply someone who writes plays. So some critics, before the post-colonial readings, thought that Prospero was a mirror of Shakespeare, that they were the same. Because like Shakespeare creates action on the stage, Prospero creates action in the play by using his magic. Starting with the artificial tempest of the opening scene, Prospero directs, rewards, and punishes the main characters according to his master plan, which is to marry his daughter, Miranda, to Ferdinand, the son and heir to the Duke of Naples, his former enemy. This plan is considered his revenge for his forcible exile from his own kingdom. If you are exiled, you are sent away, and obviously you are forced to do that. Therefore, some people believe that Prospero emerges as an all-knowing and loving artist whose motives are acceptable. So some people think that Prospero and the way he behaves and the way he acts in the text are acceptable because his motives are to get revenge. And he deserves that revenge because he's been treated so badly. This tradition of privileging Prospero's power as morally acceptable, remember morals is the difference between good and bad, began to be overshadowed by the growing importance of Caliban. So when people started to look at Caliban, they realised that we shouldn't privilege Prospero's power and think that what he's doing is okay. When viewing Caliban's servitude from his perspective, they began to revise the play in defence of Caliban's right to the island, on which he is born prior to Prospero's arrival. So the debate here already is Prospero the rightful leader, and is what he does okay, or is Caliban the rightful leader? Caliban's statement in the play, "This island's mine, by Sycorax my mother, which thou takest from me," became the rallying cry for African and Caribbean victims of colonization during this time. So people were unhappy that their lands were being colonized, and these people, the African and Caribbean individuals, the natives, believed that this line was almost motivation. It rallied them together and pushed them on to fight. For instance, a black writer celebrates Caliban's verbal attacks on Prospero and questions Prospero's claims to the island. So when Caliban is being incredibly horrible to Prospero, a lot of black writers, particularly one individual, celebrates that because he has every right to be horrible to Prospero because Prospero's claim to the island is questionable. This writer also believes that Ariel represents the mixed races who are more able to accept their less severe experience of inequality. So they're saying that Ariel represents a person of mixed race, in this case, half black and half white. And they believe that someone of mixed race is more able to accept their experience of inequality. Ariel, although he is a slave, is treated much better than Caliban. That's why they believe that Ariel is a character of mixed race. Most critics agree that Shakespeare used Elizabethan travel writing both for his presentation of the opening storm and shipwreck, but also, and more importantly, for his presentation of the European explorers' confrontation with a savage Caliban. We know from the beginning of our study of the Tempest that when explorers went to these uncolonized lands, they were met with natives, and that is represented in the Tempest as a savage Caliban. Critics note how the figure of Caliban easily merges into the image of a cannibal. Notice how their names are quite similar, Caliban and Cannibal. A mythical character, mythical savage who many European travellers claim to have come across. So when the European explorers came home from their trips, they would say that they were met by cannibals and savages on the island. This focus on Caliban's portrayal calls for people to rethink Prospero's and Caliban's competing views of history and settlement of the island. So that is the debate. Prospero and Caliban, their disagreement of who is in charge of the island. According to Prospero, Caliban's mother was the damned witch Sycorax, who for mischiefs manifold and sorceries terrible to enter human hearing from Algiers was banished to the island. When Prospero recounts this story to Ariel, he makes sure to remind Ariel of the distinction between Sycorax's evil magic and his own supposedly good magic. The word supposedly means that the writer of this article, the critic, questions whether Prospero's magic is actually good. Prospero says, "This blue-eyed hag was hither brought with child, and here was left by the sailors. Thou, my slave, as thou reports thyself, was then her servant, and for thou wast a spirit too delicate to act her earthy and abhorred commands. Refusing her grand hest, she did confine thee by help of her more potent ministers, and in her most unmitigable rage, in a cloven pine, within which rift imprisoned thou didst painfully remain a dozen years." So Prospero says to Ariel, remember that when you refused to do Sycorax's work, she imprisoned you in a cloven pine for a dozen years. He's reminding Ariel how bad Sycorax was in comparison to how good he believes that he is. Once he establishes Sycorax's supposedly evil nature, Prospero then labels her son, Caliban, as less than human, freckled whelp, hag-born, not honoured with a human shape. However, even as he insults Caliban, Prospero claims to have treated him with kindness in attempts to make him more human and civil. If you're civil, that means when you say, for example, if you have an argument with a friend and you don't want to be friends with them, but you might be civil, you might be polite. He says, "I have used thee, filth as thou art, with human care, and lodged thee in mine own cell, till thou didst seek to violate the honour of my child." So once Prospero defines Caliban as a potential rapist of his daughter Miranda, he easily justifies taking him into forced servitude, as he explains in this exchange. Miranda says, "'Tis a villain, sir, I do not love to look on. But as 'tis, he does make our fire, fetch in our wood, and serves in offices that profit us." What ho, slave, Caliban! So Prospero says that he treated Caliban kindly, and the only reason that he stopped treating Caliban kindly is because Caliban attempted to rape Miranda, and therefore that gave him the perfect justification to enslave Caliban. And it seems here that the exclamation marks signifies that Prospero enjoys the fact that he's enslaved this Caliban. Prospero's justifications of his enslavement of the savage Caliban, whose vile race, a quote from the play, lacks natural goodness, are strongly challenged by post-colonial criticism. So, critics, after colonialism, so when that stopped, began to question Caliban's justification of slaving Caliban. They view Prospero's and Miranda's relations with Caliban as a representation of European colonialism, one that reveals Shakespeare's mixed feelings towards Prospero's power and Europeans' colonizing activities among non-European natives that they encountered in the Americas, Africans, and the Caribbean. So critics, post-colonial critics, believe that the presentation of Prospero and Miranda versus Caliban is a representation of how Shakespeare felt about colonization and exploration at the time that he was writing. Colonizers assumed that the natives lacked any culture or formal language until the Europeans brought them the gifts of Western language and culture. If the natives resisted European rule, then they were labelled as savages who were beyond help. Kind of sounds a little bit like Caliban. Shakespeare even makes Caliban articulate this dilemma when he exclaims to Miranda and Prospero, "You taught me language, and my profit on it is I know how to curse." So Caliban is a native, and he is taught by the colonizers, Prospero and Miranda, how to speak. But then he used that language to curse them. And at that point, Prospero and Miranda were no longer kind to him. They believed that he was beyond help, as he had no goodness. Critics then began to question Prospero's rule and developed an understanding of Caliban's position. In doing so, there was more acknowledgement of the significance of the play's historical context. So Prospero and Miranda represent the colonizers, according to these critics, and Caliban represents the native. So after reading this article, has this changed how you think about the Tempest? Pause the video and just have a reflection on this question. Okay, so your first task is I would like you to go to Show My Homework and complete the quiz titled English Thursday the 11th. Sorry, that says January, but it's meant to say February. You need to go to Show My Homework and complete that quiz. Once you've done that, you need to return to the video because there is one more task that you need to complete. Pause the video, go and complete the quiz, and then come back to this video. Okay, if you're back, that means that you have completed the quiz and you're ready to complete the final task. You're going to use the sentence starters below to complete a paragraph about the play based on the article. So, Shakespeare presents colonization as. You need to write an idea in your own words to describe how you think Shakespeare presents colonization after reading that article. And then you want to embed a quotation. You can rewind the video because there are lots of quotes that we looked at throughout the article that you can use here. Then you need to explain your point of view. Shakespeare appears to be suggesting colonization is problematic because you need to explain why colonization seemed problematic in the play. This interpretation is supported by post-colonial readings of The Tempest because you then need to go back to the article and find a reason from the article that supports your point of view. You need to tell me what the critics thought and why they thought that. And then at the end, you need to reinforce your main point. How does Shakespeare present colonization? Pause the video and complete the paragraph now before returning. Okay, if you're back, that means you completed this paragraph. I know it's challenging, but I'm sure you've done excellently, and I look forward to seeing your work. Remember, if you're submitting your work by your phone, you're submitting a handwritten piece of work. You need to look for one of these images. If you're submitting a Word document, you need to look for the paperclip. Remember, you need to make sure that the subject of your email looks like this. It should say English lesson, the number of the lesson, and then the date. A shout out to Sophia, who has been doing that consistently, which means that it's very easy for me to track her submissions. Go ahead and submit your work before moving on to the next lesson, and I will speak to you very soon. Well done.